It's like permanently etched into silicone. Is that how it works? No. Somebody who knows how solid state needs to just sit down with me and explain it like
Magnets.
magnets.
How do they work?
Tiny magnets. Essentially, I don't know. Favorite winter sport. This wasn't copied from January. So welcome. This is the Salt Lake City Python meetup group. If you want a more serious meetup group, the UJUG meets down south. That one. Anybody know UJUG? Utah Java Users Group. Anybody who goes there? Okay, maybe they're not as serious as me, but I don't know. This is a very informal meetup group. Lots of pizza, and yeah, we've been doing this for over 9 years now, which I can't believe. Started this in the back of a coffee shop in Sugar House, and we want to do a web dev meetup, and then it became like a everything Python meetup, and then it was like focused on backend, and then it became like data science, and now it's like people are asking me on Messenger like, "Are you gonna do an AI talk? Are you gonna?" I'm like, "Uh-oh, is that really the new trend?" Because sometimes you see it early, so that's out there. But also, this is like Python is code, and code is for people, right? And Python is the most for people code I feel like is out there. It's the second best language at everything, and it's fun to be part of this community, especially after something like COVID, where everybody was staring at boxes all day of faces. So it's good that everybody came out. I'm glad to see everybody in good health, and I drove here. And yeah, a little bit about myself. I'm Ferris. I used to be an Invite employee, but now I'm unemployed, as I mentioned earlier. If your organization's looking for an engineering manager, I'm your guy. If you're looking for a software engineering lead, and then, you know, they want to be a manager, I'm also your guy. And yeah, I don't know. This is the one time I get to pitch myself, I guess. We'll open it up for everybody else, actually, too, in the Who's Hiring, Who's Looking section of our agenda. But yeah, first off, we'll do other intros. It's always something non-Pythonic. Jonas, since this is your first non-official time co-organizing, what's a question you have for everybody who's due?
Recommendations for sewer people?
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to put favorite flower.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying, yeah.
So, yeah, because it's June showers bring me flowers. Wait.
April showers bring many flowers.
Yes. Ferris and I like daffodils a lot because it's a sure sign of good things to come. So maybe it's, and dandelions because my kid likes to. Cool. Sweet. Jonas.
I'll go at the end. Flowers.
Who else is new here? A lot of folks. Okay, we'll start over here. The gentleman with the hat. Derek?
Derek, yes.
Derek.
And I'm just saying favorite flower.
Yeah, these three things. Your name, what's occupying your time. Usually it's an employment thing, but I can say fun.
What is that? Oh yeah, I have a 1.5-year-old, so.
Oh, say no more, fam.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. No.
Yeah.
Favorite flower. I've been keeping a peace lily alive for about 2 years now. I don't know how. It's just.
Has it rewarded you with another bloom?
Yes, it has.
Nice.
So, I was pretty stoked.
I mean, it's amazing. And then 1.5. That's when I got that camera. Take lots of pictures. Like when mine was 1.5, like it just goes by so fast. So
yeah, it is going by there.
and it's peak cuteness according to most of the graphs I drew out.
I would agree with that so far.
How about this gentleman right next to you?
Hey, my name's Dan. I had it and I lost it. What is occupying my time? Derek and I work together. I work at Recursion, and somewhat recently we started kind of internal Python guild, and so that's kind of something that's been occupying my time. So I'm hoping to be more of a regular to these and cross-pollinate with other Python experts. And then favorite flower. My dad's a big gardener, and I always remember the lilacs being the smell. Yeah, so I'm gonna say lilacs.
Oh, can I change mine? Lilac and jasmine. Now that I think of the smells. That's what during COVID I was like, I wonder if I'll ever smell that again. I was like, made me so sad, and then it came back. Yes. Awesome. Sweet. Who else was new? There's so many new faces. I love it. Isaac.
I'll go. Yeah, that's my name. Most of it's occupying my time at work, so that's not very interesting, but that's.
But where do you work?
I work for a company that does like HR, like account planning and compensation planning, that kind of stuff. I'm back in, usually working on the back end, which is written in Django, so lots of Python. Favorite flower is, I'm gonna say like a hydrangea. It's like a very, very bright pink flower. Just got some on our back deck, so it's been, I don't know, it smells great. So I'll go with that.
It's been a good season for it. That's why.
That's about it.
Anybody else who's new? This
My
gentleman.
name's Doug. I'm developing for a long time, want to learn Python, doing some consulting work for Griffith College in Dublin, Ireland, and pretty sure about the flower, Gerber daisies or Mr. Lincoln rose, whatever. I like the color.
I need to look these up now because now you're naming flowers that are more esoteric. I'll ask ChatGPT to describe
For
it.
the benefit of all of us, Steve, can you Google it? So
Yeah. Yes. Tim Berners-Lee did a talk about how you should surf the net together. So anyway, and now you see all my
I think he said hydrangeas.
hydrangea. Is that what it means?
Yeah.
Hydrangea.
Right there. It was suggested.
No, not shopping. Oh, these are the ones that change depending on soil acidity.
Correct.
And then what was the other one? You said some.
You need to look up Columbine while you're
There
there.
you go.
Oh, I'm very familiar, but for those who are not from
Colorado.
from the Rockies,
It was
this is a
beautiful.
beautiful flower.
Yeah.
I've spotted these actually up in where was it? It was in Little Cottonwood at the very top, Alta,
I need perennials or annuals.
and they were like, "Don't get bearded because it's
My
beautiful."
son and I are going to Colorado around the first week of August to take pictures of those.
Oh,
They
excellent.
cover the mountainsides.
Yeah, there's a lot of Tony Grove has not columbines, but they also have like the
Yeah, about 100 different varieties of flower will be all across there. It's like somebody went through and just had reseeded.
Whoa, are you new to the meetup as well?
Do what?
Are you new to this meetup?
Are you new?
I'm sort of new. I came once last year. My name is John.
Yeah, reintroduce yourself. You're like,
I'm,
is this your favorite?
yeah, far and away. It laps everything. And I do like the red paintbrushes too. I've been developing for decades as well. I was in law enforcement for 40 years and wrote lots of applications for law enforcement. Microsoft even did a case study on one. And my brother and I, who is also a retired deputy chief from Memphis, Tennessee, are writing a project in Django for law enforcement. And I was going to mention, I wouldn't mind showing it to you, in a future meeting. It's pretty astounding.
Yeah, this is where we'd love to hear about it. This is exactly the forum that you should be at to discuss. So, yeah, and then I'll talk about how law enforcement uses genealogical databases to track down serial killers.
We use all kind of data. You would.
They got the Idaho killer that way. It was should sync
Golden
up
State.
sometime.
Too.
Yeah. Who else is new? Josh.
Hey, I'm Josh. I work mostly, I'm a system engineer with L3 Harris. I don't really do any software development there, but I would like to in the future.
Yeah.
And I'm also going to school. I'm doing an online Master of Computer Science with the University of Illinois. And I'm mostly doing machine learning stuff there.
Sweet. Favorite flower?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say hydrangeas as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's look at them again.
Yeah. I've also got some in my front yard, so I like it.
Now I'm remembering that that's my wedding flower. And I'm like, honey, I'm sorry, I didn't. But she's been helping me at it. So anyway, this gentleman.
Yeah, my name is Alex. One thing I'm trying to do right now is build a Rust kernel based off.
Get out. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I could say Python.
No, I'm just joking. I'm totally joking. This is a polyglot group that just
Yeah.
has Python in the title. So
I don't know, is dandelion a flower?
yes. Heck yeah. Do you like the fact that it's so virulent
Yes.
and it makes like middle-aged men mad?
Yes.
What are you currently doing? What's taking up your time?
Like I said, the Rust thing is one thing.
Oh,
I mean, there's other stuff like have you heard of it's called like Bandit or like cyber security thing? It's like a test thing. This guy's not it.
We can talk a little bit about it later today.
Inside Rust kernel.
Just an operating system kernel in Rust. Yeah.
And then exception 11. Sorry, that's not your name, but yeah, sorry. Because we had an algorithm and then you were number 11, but then you wrote the A, which I thought was cool. But
Well, I didn't know it was a number.
I know. It's my fault.
I can repurpose this. Well, yeah, hey guys, my name is Anu. What do I need to talk about? My favorite flower is orchid. I love growing orchids. I have a shit ton of orchids. It's no problem. But what am I doing with my time? What do I do? I'm a software engineer. I've been doing it for close to 11, 12 years now. I work for a startup that I hate, but that's another story. Other than that, I've been running rivers. I've been backpacking a lot. I've been having a good time. Yeah.
We'll talk about golden handcuffs later. I feel like a few folks in this group need some after group beers, so we could also do that. But let's get through this group, or other drinks. Let's see, community news. This is from January. So who's converted their stuff to 311? Anybody? A few folks. It's like all my pods are like cattle. I just slaughter them and put the latest Python on them. So sorry, Rancher. Sorry.
We have to. People come to complain if we don't.
Jonas works for Amazon. Everybody. He's not allowed to say
Did you get introductions from everybody?
Sorry.
Did you get introductions from everybody?
Oh, sorry. Did you? No.
I think you skipped me. I don't know if you skipped
Did you raise your hand? And
That's still well. That's why I was raising.
My
my hand.
apologies. I'm sorry. Thanks for calling me out. See, it's a community group. Everybody should feel empowered.
My name is Lane. Currently, I'm occupying my time with Diablo 4. Just dropped 2 days ago.
How do you like it?
It's good. It's pretty good so far. My favorite flower is a tulip.
You know, this should be a 3-lip.
A 3.
Yeah, well, it's a 2-lip. One out of 3 and a 4.
I've been playing Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh, me too.
I was gonna bring the amiibo, but I was like, that'll be too dirty, and it's the wrong group. So, I'm glad. Oops. Anybody else I missed? Okay. Sweet. Any other community news in the tech ecosystem? Any new learning model just dropped and totally caused existential crisis? For those facing that, I recommend the Planet Money mini series right now that's going on about AI.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a good one. Mm-hmm. And they're all using LangChain. So that's my other thing. Learn how to use LangChain. I want to give a talk on this, but I'm not ready. But GPT for All runs on this thing. And I don't have to throw it anywhere. And what that means is I could do what I want to do, which is a high trust application, and maybe like do something like that. Because then I could say, hey, it all runs on your computer. We never see or hear any of it. And it doesn't go to Amazon or, I'm sorry.
Don't send it there.
But that's kind of the idea is if you could make something that's high trust and then PHI compliant, then it's like, you could cook with some gas, baby. Anyway, sorry. The other one is if anybody's been using Stable Diffusion, If you have an M1 Mac, you can use Diffusion B. So those are my 2 hints of like where things are going for art. What's really powerful about Diffusion B is that they pare down the model so you can get like a 1.8 gigabyte model, and that's like, oh, I want to do like line art, right? And then just have it generate some line art. So I pretty much, for where Ferris stands publicly, I've decided that this is going to be the new Google, the new tooling, the new whatever. Like, I have no power really to say, I'm going to boycott it and people shouldn't use AI tools for anything. But I do think that you should say, hey, I did use some AI tooling here and here, and I do use it in my workflow. But sorry, what?
I don't know if everybody's aware of this site or not, but I have found it to be orders of magnitude better than Bing or Bard. Is find.com, P-H-I-N-D.
Oh, that's the...
You can tell it to write a program for you, and it will crank it out.
Yeah, I heard about this one. Do I have a sign?
So tell it to write you a quick but accurate to-do app, and
I
it
should have
will
checked
spit
what
out
that
the code.
Delete all my repos. Okay.
And it's not limited to just Python. You can ask it anything.
Oh, this is cool.
You might want to bookmark that.
Oh, I heard about this one. Yeah. They got, okay. You are going in my favorites. Pinned. Right?
And if you're fuzzy on syntax, you know, you can throw something up there and it will spit it out. I had an issue of running an email from within my Django app, and it gave me the code how to put a horizontal ruler in the code. And I don't think you couldn't ask for better.
Would it write unit tests?
Try it.
They'll charge you extra.
I usually have a Python program just writing unit tests for it.
Try it.
That would be awesome.
It would surprise you on what it will do. And not only that, you can converse with it and say, well, that didn't work. And it'll say, I'm sorry for the confusion. Here's the real code.
Yeah. Anyway, we should maybe have like a paper reading workshop.
My kids are now using it in school.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's 2 papers I feel like are really important, scientific papers that are based on the stable diffusion paper, and then the other one for the white papers that are coming out of OpenAI, but there's a couple really interesting ones from there. But anyway, I like surfing the web together, but we're gonna move on a little bit. Jobs, who's hiring? David Heidborn, who some folks might have seen, he let people in. Hiring for sysadmin at the U of U. I can get you his details if you need. And by the way, this whole thing, if you're looking for, hey, where do I get all of this? I added it as a comment on our Meetup. But they introduced a bunch of new features this month, so I'm trying to navigate them. Like, I can message the whole group in like a little app thing. And then there's also a star rating that's very public now. I'm like, okay, don't know how I feel about that, but if you want to give me a 1 star, just tell me first, please. Just sweet. Who's hiring? BioFire. I saw that position was still open as of a couple weeks ago, but I checked before my out of vacation.
What are they hiring for?
It was just check their career pages, and there was a bunch of things apparently. So, who else?
My company, Tyler Tech, is still hiring.
Tyler Tech.
Yes. A variety of different positions.
Python position.
Not that I know of, but it's a polyglot group, so I'm sure find something that you know.
Anyone else? Okay. Check LinkedIn, suckers. Just kidding. That's interesting. I thought there were more around here that was hiring. Howdy. Welcome to the group. Were you able to grab a name tag? I'll grab you a name tag in a moment. No worries. Have a seat.
Just everywhere?
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Sweet.
Indeed usually has something.
Sweet. Awesome. Who is looking? I already talked about myself, so if you want to know more about me, just ask later. Anybody else?
So can I park in that parking lot over there, or I have to?
Oh, wait. Are you?
You gotta pay.
This is for the meetup, right?
Oh, I thought that was a metaphorical parking lot, and you were like, gonna be like, I'm looking, and no, yeah, you could park here. I think you're supposed to pay online a fee, but
This is a
yeah,
because you know it's
Uh,
small.
I usually don't. So, you know,
All right, so if the car's not there,
yeah.
That'd probably be the left
Then a
street.
spider has snatched it up, and they just braved the thunderstorm in order to just mess with one person, and that person's you. So,
It's a $40 ticket.
oh really? It's a ticket, not a tow? Okay.
This one's gone on for
A tow would have been worse.
Years.
sweet. Anybody else who's looking? Doing our, who's hiring, who's looking? What was your name, by the way?
I'm Joseph Bonet. I was working in finances, doing machine learning, deep learning, Python. Now I'm working on my Security Plus, so.
I'm gonna ask you a really weird question, but contextually, we always ask this third weird question. What's your favorite flower?
I don't have one, but I'm pretty sure it'll be the flower that's from Puerto Rico, like the official flower.
What is the official flower of Puerto Rico? Oh wait, what am I doing?
There it is. That should be it.
But this is the search engine
How do you spell
for
Puerto Rico?
developers.
You're doing it right.
I thought this was code.
Yeah. It's gonna get really interesting.
That's the
Florida and Mama.
Never heard of it.
And now I have to pump it in here. I should use stable diffusion
There
to
you go.
generate.
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's a good
Well, it looks
choice.
like hibiscus.
Hibiscus? Is that what it is?
Yeah. That's hibiscus.
So the second
no,
result there is
it's-
versus hibiscus.
It's is it?
Look at the second picture and just like the title of that page.
Ooh, it's a versus. Yeah. I wonder if it's the same and it's.
It's probably similar, but not the same.
Oh, they're both part of the whatever family, but I mean kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. There's one thing I remember from bio, it was that. So. Wow. I like that a lot of people thought it was hibiscus initially, because I bet you if we'd. So thanks for surfing the web with us. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else who's looking? Going once, going twice. All right.
That's unusual. Last time we had like 10 people.
I'm extremely pleased, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Good. We have to report this to Planet Money when they report about the job market.
Yeah.
What's going on.
Put it into the Bureau of
Yeah.
Employment.
I'm looking for a job, if that's what you mean by what you're looking.
No, you and I are going to do a startup after this.
Alright.
Okay.
Not looking anymore.
Sweet. Today's topics are not neural networks and modal. They are, big O notation and coding in a vacuum. Sweet. And if anybody else would like to give a talk, hit me up at the end of this. Remind me your name one more time.
John,
John, I'm going to hit you up right here. And
the Bloodhound.
ooh. You should speak at Python, John.
Yeah.
With the hat, please.
You know, I've been watching Sherlock a lot lately.
There you go. All right, that's all I got for now. Want to take it away, Christian?
I do.
Christian's been chomping at the bit to give a talk at this meetup for a
Yes.
while, and he has an excellent topic on big O notation. So give it a hand to
Woo.
Christian.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Let me get myself all squared up to go. This is definitely one of my favorite topics. I'm super excited. As I'm getting myself all set up to go, like I said, my name is Christian. I'm a developer. Sorry about that. With Tyler Tech. And let me get What was the plugin for the
Oh, HDMI straight in.
yes.
Yeah, you have a laptop with actual ports. I have an M1 that decided it was too cool for those.
Alright, I'm just gonna flip this around here. Alright.
Oh.
And come over here. I like to stand
Yeah, let me.
in front. Yeah, alright. So as I'm giving this presentation, I've noticed that participation makes this presentation better. It doesn't matter if you're a developer with tons of experience, if you're new, if you're learning, I want to hear from you. Some of the things I'm going to say, you're not going to like. Some of the things I'm going to say are very controversial, and that's okay. Feel free to comment. I'd love to hear your feedback, and we'll have a great discussion. It always makes this better. So first, before we talk about Big O notation, we have to talk about why should you care about Big O notation. Well, first of all, Big O notation helps you write better code. We're all here because I think we want to improve our coding while doing that continual education. Because if you're not learning and you're not growing, you're stagnating. There are developers with years and years of experience, but they're doing it in some dead programming language like COBOL, and no one wants to hire them.
Hey.
Except for that guy. Everyone wants to hire him. Big O notation is a way to make your algorithms faster and more efficient. I've been in job interviews where they've asked me about Big O notation. It's happened more than once. So this is going to benefit you. So if you're looking for your first job, you're looking to get a promotion, you're looking to change jobs because you hate your job and you think that you're, would you call it a co-janitor?
Yeah,
Yes.
backhand senior janitor, sir.
Yes, you think you're that. Big O notations for you. Also, when you use the principles of Big O notation to improve your algorithms, you do it right the first time. That way you won't have to do it again. In Spanish, we have a saying: "The lazy one works twice as hard," because you have to come back and do it over. Let's get it done right the first time. All right. So before we talk about Big O notation, I want to talk about what we need to do to improve our algorithms and some of the tips that I've learned. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is simple is always better than complex. So take a look at this class on the left. It's a queue. When you instantiate it, it creates a list with the name of queue. Now, let's say you want to know if the queue is empty or not. So we're creating this function within the queue, which returns if the length of queue is equals to 0, either returns true or false. We don't need to do this. This is completely unnecessary. For example, let's take the one on the right. It's the exact same class. We create a queue, and when we instantiate it, we create a list and with a variable name of queue. And instead, in right here, we're just returning the length of queue is equal to 0. Simple, easier to read, easier on the eyes, easier to maintain. Let's go to the next. So also, don't run your functions longer than you have to. The return statement is your friend. It doesn't matter if you're returning a value or if it's what we call a void function, which doesn't return any value. Once you're done with it, end it. This holds true especially for loops. For example, take this loop, this function. This function determines if a list has a duplicate. So it takes the list as a parameter. It declares a set. If you don't know what a set is basically like a list, but it only holds unique values. It cannot hold duplicates. And then I'm declaring a function, a variable here, which is a boolean I set to false. I loop through the list. If the item is not in the list, I put it into the set. Now, if it is in the list, I change the duplicate to I changed the has duplicates variable to true. Else just means this is when the for loop is done running. This is what we're going to do. I return that variable, which is the boolean. This is completely unnecessary. We don't need to do this because we know that there's a duplicate by the time it gets to the first index. We can stop it right there. Instead of wasting our time going through this entire entire loop. So let me show you how you can use a return statement to make your loop better. So let's say the right one does the exact same thing. It determines if the list and the parameter has any duplicates. But I just declare a set called value set. I loop through the list. If the value set, if the current item is already in the value, we know it's a duplicate. We just hit return. This stops the whole function, stops the whole for loop, and gives us an answer. So we can run through this. Now, some of you are thinking, well, what's the big deal? There's only 4 items in this list. Well, what if this list had thousands? What if this list had millions? Because some of you are going to want to work in big data. But if we can use our return statements to finish this fast and get the job done. Dry. Don't repeat yourself. This is something that's very, very important to optimize our algorithms and make it better. So we're going back to the queue, which is a class that when it's instantiated, it declares a list and calls it the variable queue. Now let's say you want to pop the queue. Well, what I mean by pop the queue is remove the first item in the queue and return it. But you can't return something that's not there. So first I'm checking, is the length of the queue equal to 0? If it's so, I'm stopping it. And let's say here's P, right here. It just shows you what's the first item in the array. And it's doing the exact same code. If length of the queue equals 0, return. But I don't need to do this. I'm repeating the same code here and here. This is terrible because because it's not modular. I'm just wasting space and making this more legible. So this one on the right, it's the exact same queue. However, I put the verification if the queue is empty into its own function. So here, if queue is empty, return the length of queue equal to 0, true or false.
But it's a lot more. You're gonna take up a lot more space in a sense.
In one sense, yes.
You're instantiating a stack every time you call it.
In one sense, yes, I am taking up more space. If I make an error here, in this one, that's a one-stop shop for debugging. Instead of let's say I kind of screw up this one and screw up this one, then there's more place after to go and to debug my code. So yes, there's always trade-offs. And some of the things I'm going to say you guys are not going to like, and that's okay. But this is, and I'm reusing this function here and this boolean here. So let's go to our next one right here. Let's talk about guardrails. When you don't use guardrails, you get what I call indentation hell. For example, take this one. This one here on the left-hand side, the purpose of this function is to determine if the user can access the dashboard. It checks if they're an active user, if they're subscribed and paid. Look how horrible this is. Can you imagine having to come back and debug this? And if you get the indentation off, the whole thing gets messed up. It gets thrown out of balance. And this is my personal opinion, but this is aesthetically unpleasing. Or we can do the one on the right, which uses guardrails, and it does the exact same thing. In this case, it's raising exceptions, but you could also use the return keyword. You could also return false if you want to. And this is a great way to make your code legible, more readable, easier to maintain. So when you have to come back, it's going to be a lot easier if you make a mistake. All right, let's talk about some more functions, some more tips on improving your functions. I recommend that you keep your functions between 3 to 4 lines. Now, this isn't always possible. I get that, but it's a way to make them more legible, easier in the eyes, easier to update and maintain. Your function should only do one thing. This is what we call separation of concerns. Also makes it more modular. If your function has the word "and" in it, it's probably doing too much. You should probably break that up. You can nest your functions. I don't recommend it because then it gets back to that modularity. If it's nested within a function, you can't reuse it. Plus, you're making that original function longer. Also, if that case, you should probably try to limit the parameters to about 2 to 3 at the most. I understand this isn't always possible. There's some cases where you have to do more. I think you can tell if your function is good is if a junior computer programmer can look at your function and instantly knows what it does. No one scores points with their boss by writing the overly complex algorithms. I've never looked at an overly complex algorithm and be like, that guy is smart. I just look at it and I get frustrated because I'm usually the one who has to fix it at my work. I'm in my 4th year of computer programming. And as I've gotten more experience, I've noticed that my functions have got simpler, more shorthand, easier to read. All right, so some more tips is I recommend that your functions have a name that's descriptive. Avoid vague things like get info or get data. Everything that we do in coding has to do with data and information. Now, keep in mind that another developer at some point is going to have to come back to your code and either patch it or develop it. And it's probably going to be you. And if it's not, you're going to be working on another project, trying to concentrate, and then some junior computer programmer is going to be calling you on Slack or on Microsoft Teams, interrupting your concentration and asking you questions. And you're going to be struggling to remember it, and it's going to be really, really frustrating. So get it right done the first time so they don't have to contact you. Better functions are easier to debug. And one of the worst examples I've heard of writing functions is this guy, he wrote this API. And he made the functions, he gave them names of Pokemon moves. This is not good coding. And think about having to document that, having to debug that. It makes no sense.
What if it's a Pokemon API?
That is a different story. If you write a Pokemon API, let me know about it.
There is, for the record, there's an amazing Pokemon API, and it's a Django app, and it's actually used to teach Django. So if you want to learn how to write an API with Django, and you know Pokemon, you're good to go. Just read it.
Yes, that's the only exception. Otherwise, if you're like writing something for your job, like for example, I build websites for the federal government, don't do it. There's no shortcuts to improving your algorithms. Practice makes perfect. And it takes time, and it takes effort, and it's going to be hard. So here's some great sites I put down that help you improve your algorithms. All right. So when it comes to using comments in your code to document what you're doing, there's 2 schools of thought. There's one school of thought that says every function should have some sort of comment to explain what it does. I'm not in this code. I'm not in this camp. I'm in the other camp that says good code does not need comments to explain it. It should be self-explanatory. That's what the documentation aside is for. This is also very controversial as well. And that's okay. So let's get to what we came here to talk about. Big O notation. What is it? Why should we care about it? So Big O notation is a mathematical formula to describe the performance of an algorithm. It determines how fast the algorithm is when it's processing a large amount of data. I'll try to keep the math to a minimum, as much as I can. But there's some things that you're just going to have to look up on your own and study on your own. So let's look at what Big O notation means and try to decode it. So it usually starts with an O and then N. N equals the number of actions. Think of it as a variable. It just depends on what it's going to be. This is the basis. We want N to be as low as we can. That means less actions, that means faster. Right. And this is the holy grail of Big O notation. This is what we want all our algorithms to be. O1 means one action. Now, obviously, we can't do it, but this is the fastest one. Because no matter what we do, what we put into this algorithm, it's always going to be one action, super fast. So let me give you an example. We're back to our Q again. When we instantiate the queue, it creates this list, we call it queue, and let's say we want to do a peek. Peek just tells us what is the first item in the queue. So basically it returns the index of 0 of the queue. It doesn't matter if this queue is 1, it doesn't matter if it has a billion, it's of the length of 1 billion. It's always going to be one of actions, super fast. Now let's say, crazy. All right. So another example of this is our object. So let's say I create this object and I want to return my name. By using the key of name to return my name, that is O of N1. Or if I want to update my name. Because using those keys to access the object, that's O of N1. It's super fast. That's why we like to say, when you're doing algorithms, if there's a problem, throw one of these objects or dictionaries at it. That'll solve your problem. All right. O of N2. The point I'm getting at this is O of N stacks. So let's say you run O of N1 algorithm twice. It becomes O of N2 because those are two separate actions. For example, let's take this one here. This first number equals to takes a list as a parameter and a number. And it determines if the index 0 is equal to the number. And let's say I run it twice. This algorithm in and of itself is O of 1, but since I'm running it twice, it becomes O of N2 because it's stacking. I'm doing more and more things. And the purpose of this, the purpose of optimizing our algorithm is less actions as possible. Remember, we want N to be as low as we can.
Wait, I don't quite understand. How is it O of 2?
Because I'm running the same thing twice.
That would be 2 into O of 1.
Say that again?
That would be 2 into O of 1, and anything with big notation multiplied by a constant is insignificant. It's still O of 1.
Oh. Well, I see. I think you're right. This is a very contrived, bad example. So I'm glad you pointed that out. All right. So let's look up O of N. N is equal to the number of the elements in the array. So let's say there's 5 items in the array. That means 5 actions. It assumes that you're going to touch each item in that particular list. This is what we call linear time. So what it basically means is the longer the list is, the longer it's going to take, because it assumes it's going to touch every one. So take this super contrived example, which is it contains number, which takes a list and a parameter and also takes a number. And it loops through the list, and it determines if that list contains that number and the parameter. Now, let's take this list, and we're going to look for 5. So it's going to loop through here, and at the end it's going to return 5. Now, it doesn't matter if 5 is the first one or the middle one, because O of N is very pessimistic. It takes a very dark view of everything. It always assumes the worst case scenario. And this is to our advantage, because we want to optimize our algorithms, and we have to take in the worst case scenario, because we never know. So one example of big O of N would be like reading through an entire dictionary just to find the definition of one word. O of N applies not only to our regular for loops, but our while loops and our do while loops. All right, let's go ahead and get to the next one. O of N2, O of N to the power of 2, excuse me. So if you don't remember math, the power of 2 means that whatever number times itself. So let's say we have 4 items in our list, 4 times 4. Usually what this means is when you do a nested loop. So for example, take this has duplicates function. It does a nested loop on the same loop to determine if it has duplicates. And like I said, again, it doesn't matter if the duplicates are here at the end, in the middle, at the beginning. It's O of N2 because of the nested. Because we're going over the same thing over and over, the same list over and over. Now, if you do a triple nested loop, then it becomes O n to the power of 3. I don't recommend this at all. Whenever you can, try to avoid nested loops. They're slow, they don't work that great. There's better ways to do this.
Memorization is one way.
Memorization?
Memo.
I can never get that word. Talk to us.
Memorization.
The R is not in there.
Memorization? I don't know what that is. What is that?
Memorization is where you are doing oh man.
Interview
Actually,
failed.
actually,
Just kidding.
The first time you calculate
You remember the values.
the first time you calculate a value, you remember it like in a dictionary or something.
Caching.
And so the next time you need it, you just look it up from that dictionary rather than you calculate it.
I remember by adding the R back and saying the computer's just gonna remember it for next time.
Memorize it.
Yes, dictionary is a powerful tool.
It's a very commonly used thing in recursion problems.
So let's talk about
Dynamic programming is another word you'll hear used with that.
say that again.
Dynamic programming is another word you'll hear used with that. If you're like looking up Googling.
I need to look that up because I've heard that term. I just can't remember what it means off the top of my head. But like, there's many ways to avoid nested loops. You just have to do your homework and find out ways. And we're going to talk about another one of them. So let's talk of a log n. So without getting into too much of the math, log n basically it's a mathematical formula which is a decimal that calculates the rate of growth. So usually it's like this slope that comes up like this gradual slope. So one example of this is, let's say you create a binary search. What is a binary search? So binary search is it takes in a one parameter, a list, and the number, or it could be anything. And it takes this and it has to take a sorted list. And what it does is it looks at the midpoint in the list and says, okay, is the number I'm looking for bigger or smaller than that? If it's bigger, it cuts the list in half, takes this half, takes the midpoint again. Is it bigger or smaller than midpoint? So let's say it's smaller than the midpoint, so then it cuts the list in half again. And it keeps cutting in half again and again and again until it either finds it at the midpoint, or what it does is it determines that it's not there and just returns false. So this has a gradual growth. So instead of doing a nested loop, you could do like this to gradually find it. All right. Let's talk of O of n log n. This runs in what we call logarithmic linear time. So basically, whatever is the amount of items in our array, which is n, times log of n. So an example of this, and I didn't put it because it just takes too long. It's very long. It's the merge sort. So basically, what the merge sort is, it takes a list that's unsorted, and it breaks up into chunks, and it continues to merge it and break it up until it's finally sorted. I recommend looking this up on your own. It was just too long for me to put it here. All right. This is the worst. Never, ever do big O n factorial. So that exclamation point means factorial. What's a factorial? So let's say you want to know the factorial of 5. So 5, and this works for pretty much any whole number. 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Terrible. And this is an example of a factorial. It's calculating the factorial of 5. Whatever you do, never ever make your algorithms like this.
So your function there calculates the factorial, but what's the big O of that function?
This one, since it is factorial, it's literally O of n factorial.
It's calling itself.
This happens to be recursive factorial.
Oh, because you're calling it recursively. Okay.
Not all recursive functions are factorial. Let me be clear. Recursion is good. We have nothing against recursion, but the way I'm using it, this is really bad. Don't do it. All right. So a few things just to overlooking O of n1, and we're just scratching the surface. There's so many more things that I invite you to learn on your own and continue studying so that you can make the best algorithms possible. We like O of n1 and we like O of n log n. We don't like nested loops because they're super slow. And we've talked about some really good ways of avoiding nested loops. Remember, big O notation is pessimistic. It's dark. It assumes the worst every time. And there's no substitute for practice and time. This is going to be hard to make your algorithms better, but you can do it. And last but not least, I brought in this really cool graph that shows you. So here on the left, we have the number of actions. We want this as low as possible. And here is the number of items. We don't have control over this because we don't know how many, we can't predict how long the lists or the collections are going to be put into our algorithms by the user. So here, the worst one, we have n factorial. And then we have this purple one I didn't get is O to the power of n, also really bad. I didn't get to that one, but whatever it is, just don't do it. And then here, this orange one, this is our nested loop, O to the power of 2, and then in linear, and then O of n1, which is no matter how big our array is or set or whatever our data, it's always going to be the same. There's also log n here. You can't hit my other things.
So I think I know what you mean when you write that big O notation is sort of pessimistic, but I don't think it's generally true because for many algorithms, the actual runtime depends on the data.
Yeah.
So there are many sort of sort algorithms, for example, where you go to Wikipedia and that's like a best case, average case, and worst case. And there are actually different big O's, like best case might be O n, average case or n log n. So I think I totally get what you mean here, but it's not really a general statement.
I did not know that. I did not know there are different types of ON, and I think that's a good point.
It's sort of like a sorting algorithm in general. They're often n log n, but if all the numbers are already sorted, your algorithm might actually run an ON in that specific case. So that's the idea.
And that's why we're just scratching the surface today. We're just talking about it. And there's so much more nuance. So I want to turn over to you. Do you have any questions or comments?
I mean, I think one thing I would say is there are a lot of ready-made tricks that you can use to help reduce your runtime. For example, hash tables. Hash tables are a great way to do the same thing as memoization, remembering things. A set basically does the same thing as a hash table does. Recursion with memoization is another way to reduce your runtimes, things like that. So it's a very interesting problem. I quite enjoy it. Thanks for the talk.
No problem. And when you're doing your recursion, don't forget to return, do the ending statement. I think I saw a hand here and then a hand here.
I was just going to say, also, it's good to realize when, depending on the problem you're solving, that it's impossible to make it any faster. Like, for example, sorting, the best you can do is n log n. Certain problems, the best you can do is n factorial.
Correct.
So it's good to realize that's the best you can do for a optimal solution. But some of those problems you can do estimation type techniques or other heuristics that maybe your answer is not guaranteed to always be the correct one, but most of the time it's close enough. But you can find it in a reasonable amount of time instead of waiting for the death of the universe.
Yep. Sometimes, so a lot of these things, they're guidelines for you. None of these things are written in stone. That's why I said a lot of these things are just my opinion. And some of you are saying, this guy is totally full of it, I don't agree with him, and that's okay. That's why we have these discussions, yes.
Yeah, I think one thing to kind of piggyback off of what Lane was saying was kind of understanding the context of where you're at. Like maybe lengthy sort one time amortizes the cost of access later, and so like understanding access patterns, stuff like that is important. I was going to ask a question because you had the one slide about functions.
You want me to go back?
You don't have to, but if you wanted to, it was when you were talking about like how you think about functions. this is more of like a meta question about.
So I'm getting
Yeah,
into
yeah,
that.
this right here, yeah. So this is more just a meta question for you, kind of about this talk. I don't know, is this like something you're wanting to improve and
Of
continue?
course.
Okay. Have you done much like functional programming?
Not too much. I haven't practiced too much, but what do you think?
Just like some of these tenets, I think you're getting at some of those, but then also like I think there's more you could even add to this if you do a little bit more of that, like thinking about like pure functions and things like that. One thing that's been kind of interesting from where I currently work was like some of the early developers, they were big closurists, and so they wrote their Python very much like functional code, and it's really changed my like view of how I write Python, and so I think I liked this slide, and I think
What do you mean functional?
like a functional programming language, so.
I don't quite understand what you mean.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Now I'm on the spot because I'm gonna try to give like a definition of it and do a terrible job. But like there's various like I think there's various like spectrum of these kinds of languages. But so like you have like imperative languages and like object-oriented languages, and so like an object-oriented. So Python kind of does whatever you want it to do in a lot of sense. But it has like classes and stuff like that. So when you think kind of in object-oriented mode, there's a lot of state that is like in the objects. So in functional programming, you kind of pass the functions are pure in the sense that there's no side effects.
Pass the function. It's actually functional classes versus class-based classes. Is that what you're talking about? Where you have more control of the functional.
Generally, I think that one of the main things is like you're talking about is that in functional programming, so-called pure functions always return the same value with the same input, and there's no side effects. So something like print is not a pure function because there's a side effect that the state of the machine changes.
So if you were to implement like a queue or something, right? You would give the object you want to modify and the new item as parameters. It wouldn't be like you call on the queue dot thing or whatever, right? So like when you do like queue dot add, you're modifying data somewhere else. And so the list that was passed in is not modified. You return the new list with the new item on it, if that makes sense. So there's not like a side effect.
You're talking about passing values by memory or by reference. Is that what you're talking about?
I mean, in that example, yeah, no.
It's always a value.
Everything would be passed by value in this case, right? Because I'm not modifying that memory. I'm returning you a new thing is modified. So.
I mean, Python has the sense of copying, right? You have deep copy and regular copy.
Right.
When you do a regular copy, it does a superficial copy.
Yeah.
When you do a deep copy, it creates a whole different memory object of the thing that you passed in.
Yeah.
So Python can do both.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can very much write like functional code in Python, but some of like the core tenets. I think if there was a pure functional programming person here, they'd probably be like calling me out. But like, yeah, you can.
I get where you're struggling. I don't know a very good concise definition of
Yeah.
it.
So for instance, there is a tool in Python called tools with a Z, TOOLZ. It kind of helps you write more functional Python code. Has a lot of ideas like currying and stuff like that.
I bumped into an article a number of years ago, Functional Programming for the Rest of Us.
Yeah.
Def Marco, written in 2006. And it helped. I had one of those aha experiences. Like, oh, okay, I get it. And just
Yeah,
recommend it.
never encountered that functional programming in the sense used. That's what I was
Another core tenet of it is like the idea of like higher order functions. Like you can pass functions as function. You pass functions to functions as parameters. That's like another core kind of concept of it.
The function-based classes don't have inheritance and polymorphism like the class-based do.
Imagine writing Python, but you only get to use lambdas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, lambdas, like even list comprehensions are kind of a functional.
Or maybe
style.
don't imagine.
Or you're building a new list from an existing list rather than modifying the list.
I mean, to your point of passing functions as references, you can't do that in Python too.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not that you can't do functional programming in Python, it just wasn't good for them.
And that concept in Python comes out of this paradigm of functional programming.
So there's a lot of individuals here who have many more years of experience on me, and that is not lost on me as far as coding. So it's my turn to ask the audience a question. So let's say you're standing here, and you want to tell the junior computer programmers what's the best way to write algorithms. What would you tell them? Yes.
Avoid a loop inside of a loop. Or if you have 1 to 2 loops, your code is garbage.
Say it like that.
I would say one process per function.
I mean, I'm not going to give individual things, but I would say the more you code, the more you learn. That's the only way. You can read as much as you want about it, but unless you encounter it in a real world scenario, it's not going to stick with you.
I agree with that.
You know, it's a little late in the game to not be using AI, so I would say go to find
I've been using it as like, here's my Python code that I wrote in open source.
That's
Write
exactly
this in
what
Rust,
I do.
and I'm like, because I don't know Rust that much, right?
It's hard.
Write this in Rust, and it's like, oh, okay, that's how you write it, and then I'll go and kind of like try to compile it and get a couple errors.
I run those three AI sites that I mentioned and give them the same problem and see what they say.
Yeah.
They rarely have the same answer.
The other thing I've done is I say, give me a 12-week curriculum, and it'll actually start spitting it out. And then I say, give it to me in LaTeX. That way I can look at it better. Latex, I think is how people pronounce it, but it's actually LaTeX for the record. Thank you for that talk, Christian.
Do you want to share some of your wisdom with us, Ferris?
I don't. Well, actually, I was looking on my YouTube history, and this was like, I saw this 6 years ago, it said the last time I looked at this.
Yeah.
But I think people have seen this. This is just, this is the sound of algorithms. Who's seen this? A few folks. Well, if you haven't, you get to be one of the lucky ones. Whoa, don't look into the projector with that. Oh. So they're all being listed on the upper left, insertion. And it's giving you how many array accesses that you're doing. And of course it's throwing a random set of lines.
That's Tchaikovsky. I heard that at the last symphony.
Yeah. And it's cool to listen to him, man.
And it's like the tone depends on the height of the water.
Whoop. I love that at the end. And that whoop sound, every time I get some pull request review, that sound just...
It's funny, but in WordSound you can tell how it's splitting up into a section.
Yeah. We won't finish the whole video. The last few we'll just laugh at because they're random sorts. So maybe we'll do a dance party.
So what do the noises mean?
I think each red line is playing, each white line is a note. And that's every time it makes an access. And
the pitch depends on how high the
To some extent, yeah.
this is the GCC one that you're probably using without realizing it, if I'm not mistaken. And this is a different algorithm that you would hit in C.
It sounds like an Atari game that would drive my parents crazy.
Yeah. Like the
Wait, is that when you say standard library GCC, are you talking about the standard library?
Yeah. Good question. Bubble sword.
That sounds like
Cocktail shaker. What else? The dance party.
Is the random one?
No, you'll see. This is gnome sort. This one was shown to be faster than bubble sort and about as easy to write. It's like right. Yeah, it's a cool approach. This is Bogo.
So what does Python do when I write sort?
I think it's the GCC one under the hood. No, I'd have to look at the source code. And it's always the way to end that one.
Have you ever seen the Stalin sword?
Stolen sword?
Stalin.
Stalin sword. Do they like just destroy all
You
of the
just
items?
go, and if it's not in order, it goes to the gulag. So it's actually the most efficient. But
here's one more quick example of how to how under the hood there are a lot of these choices being made all the time. So this is GCC for ARM 7.2, something that you wrote on Raspberry Pi, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. And this code is from code on Cloudflare, and they needed to basically be able to quickly return. It's a standard thing that you might see of, hey, if it's 6, return Afghanistan. If it's these are all country codes, in case you can't tell. And what's interesting is ARM v8 knows a little bit. I don't know. This is like black magic to me, but it's able to do take this and kind of put it into like its own version of key value storage on a chip or something. Like it's doing some black voodoo magic. And if anybody ever like can explain this to me, like top to bottom, I'd love it because I'm trying to learn a bit of this stuff. But yeah, this is machine code that you can pop out with V8 and why everybody's so about the M1 and stuff.
Why are they using all those if statements?
Yeah, right.
Why don't they just use a dictionary?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
an unrolled for loop.
Yeah, probably for security too.
People say a for loop or a for loop is a generalized set of statements.
Yeah.
You're just going to compare all of those anyways.
And I think this was more to be one of those examples where, yeah, I have to read the blog article about this, but it just reminded me when we were talking about
What are you trying to understand about this code?
I'm trying to understand how you get from this to this versus from this to returning it like this, you know, how I would think of it.
Is it just that the ARM, whatever that architecture is, just basically has a lookup built in?
Yeah, I think so.
So it's just
Yeah, what is this Nitoro?
What does ChatGPT say?
I should have asked him.
Yeah,
Is-
you should
mine
look
just
up the
Does it just have the lookup table in its flash memory already?
I'm gonna look.
The ADRP is the unusual command as far as sort of basic instruction. So I would look that one up.
I think ADRP is address
on the chips.
There we go.
It may be offended by use of the word dumb.
I've had it say some pretty awful stuff, so.
Yeah. I had Bing refuse to answer me because I used some word that.
Yeah, Bing I've stopped talking to. Like, we're not on speaking
Yeah,
terms.
they will stop midstream after cranking out the code and say, sorry, can't complete this, and erase the code.
So I think this answers your question, but we also have to learn
Oh.
about programming in a vacuum.
Yeah, sorry, where's Dan?
I'm here.
Oh.
It's totally fine. Like I can push. I'm okay.
No, I wasn't, I
don't
actually
wanna-
was stalling thinking you weren't here.
We only
and
have
then
20
second
minutes left,
thought.
so I don't want to like keep people extra if it's.
No. It's not a hard end. So please, programming in a vacuum. Did you bring the vacuum? Was it
No.
supposed to be running the whole thing?
Is it a Roomba or a Shark?
You're ruining my first joke, guys.
It's a shark. Just kidding.
Good, because I got one.
Is this what I want? Yeah, USB-C.
Oh, just plug it directly in. You've got one of those fancy ones.
Oh yeah, there's
Sorry?
there's an HDMI.
Oh, I do?
to that dock, so you can go straight into it.
Someone just got an IT upgrade.
You said you had an M1. I was like, I have the same machine you, I think.
No, because I have the first the little one.
You have the M11.
Yeah, the one more.
This is operational.
Okay.
So yeah, hey everybody. Kind of buried the lead on this one.
Sorry.
This is not programming a vacuum, that's a different talk, but we're going to talk about programming in a vacuum. So my name's Dan. In this slide, I'm going to do my best to try to convince you to listen, why you should listen to me, and then in the next slide, I'll tell you why not to trust anything I say. So to put on a false sense of self-assuredness here, I did my PhD at the University of Utah, just a few buildings up, working in the SCI Institute, the Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute. Started back in 2009 and had the opportunity to work with a lot of really bright people smarter than me. Got a chance to work at a few different national labs that I referenced here in the middle. And I'm currently a senior infrastructure engineer at Recursion, as I mentioned, which is a biotech company, tech bio company, right? That nomenclature is important there, I guess. Just down the road, over at the Gateway. If that introduction is unsatisfactory, I put some links to more about who I am. I'm going to start with kind of a little bit of a sentimental story, and then try to get to some practical advice a little bit later. So, when I started my PhD, I came directly out of undergraduate, had not a clue what I wanted to do. A lot of the people I was talking to that came in on my cohort, they had already had like research groups that they were working with, and they were off to the races, and I didn't have that. I kind of came out on a whim. I'd be lying if I told you that the closeness, the proximity of these beautiful mountains was not a part of my decision process in choosing graduate schools. Like I said, met a lot of really bright people, and people that made my journey across the country look like a walk across the park because they came from other parts of the world. Many of them, like, I know one of my friends who learned English by watching Friends, like that was basically like dropped into a graduate program all of a sudden doing advanced computer science. I was trying to find my own way, tried to apply the same methodology I'd applied up to this point in my life, which was just, put your head down and do the work and just put in the time, like if you don't know something, go spend the time learning it. And I'll say that I failed a lot, and I want to be clear that failing a lot is not necessarily a bad thing. I think if you're doing research correctly, that's probably a prerequisite. But I want to say that I think in hindsight now, with better hindsight, I think I did a lot of failing in the wrong way. And what I mean by that was, I kind of mentioned that I put my head down and I was afraid to fail, in a sense. So if I had an idea and I wasn't sure if it was good, rather than like go bounce it off of somebody and get it kind of like quickly dismissed and like onto something more important, or even like if there was a kernel of a good idea but I was pursuing it all the wrong way, they could have helped me. But put my head down and tried to do it, bashed my head against the wall a lot, and I'm here to say I survived that process. But in the process of I was digging this hole deeper and deeper and deeper, and graduate school became a story of extreme isolation. Not to say that I didn't have friends and a social life and whatnot, but just in terms of like technical, having like a mentor or other people to talk to about technical topics, I had kind of built these walls artificially because I thought I was too stupid to talk to these people that were smarter than me, and I had to get to a level before I can engage in conversations. So at some point, this is a little bit of a side note. Another part about research is you use a lot of research code. You're developing research code. You're also using other people's research code, and I don't mean to disparage anybody working in academia. I just think that they're optimizing for a different path, right? So when you're doing research, you don't necessarily need to have your code long-lived, right? It has like the product you're working on is a paper, is a novel insight. It is not the software that goes with that paper, oftentimes. So you often get this badge on code, and so I can tell you horror stories of like borking my GPU driver and like having to reinstall my OS because just trying to compile some code I wanted to run. And so I started in a C background and kind of at some point learned Python through this journey, but when I was starting, there was a lot of compiling. So, like I said, at some point, I learned Python throughout this process, and it was a language that really just clicked with me. Everything from just the syntax, like a lot of people hate like the white space is like meaningful. It's like, oh, it's so much nicer than having to put curly braces everywhere. But there's things like that, and then there was also just like the community, like being able to like, oh, I just need to pip install this thing, and it's all of a sudden on my machine. I don't have to go and figure out how to like compile something. Having that benefit, and also like the ability to upload a package to pip or PyPI, right? Like that's like, wow, this is super simple. Like I can do this. This is not something I need a whole team to do. So then there was kind of this shift. There was a lot of like resources out there in the Python community that just fit my mental model. I'll talk a little bit about it later, but there was like a really good podcast by a guy named Michael Kennedy that I latched onto. And when I was doing one of my internships at Idaho National Lab, I was driving in the car back and forth a lot to visit my girlfriend back here. And so I had like 6 hours a week where I was just in the car. So listened to a lot of podcasts. But yeah, somewhere in that journey, I decided to kind of shift my mindset to, rather than like this code being a side effect of writing papers, to focusing on the code as my product. I kind of realized that academia probably wasn't for me, in the sense that like I wasn't going to become a professor, and I kind of really wanted to level up more industry standard skills, like how do I build and deploy software and write quality software. I think you saw a little bit of that with Christian's talk about how to write better quality software. And so you'll see on these examples here, there's a few things. I'll tell you, it was immensely satisfying coming out of grad school. Like a couple years later, there was like some guy in Russia that wanted to use my tool, and there was a few GitHub issues that he created, and went back and forth, and it's just immensely satisfying to know that like one other person found what I had written useful. A lot of times in research, you just wonder if you're talking at a wall. So what did I discover? Badges. Badges are amazing. The talk that I want to give, talk to about the rest of the time, is about static analysis in lieu of code review. So if you're like me and you have this like impending sense of like doom whenever you have to talk to another person about your code, because you feel that you're going to be judged, this may be a way that you can help get some reassurance that what you're going to them with is at least like passing some minimum bar of effort. So I'm not going to talk at all about exercising your code. This is all about looking at your code at rest. So that's what I mean by static analysis tools. So the first time I gave this talk to my internals of my company. You got a lot of feedback. So that was why I kind of approached Ferris and about possibly giving this here. So that was before I had the benefit of watching Al Speigert's PyCon talk this year. If you haven't watched it, and if you find anything I say interesting, I highly recommend going and watching that, because what I'm about to tell you is a poor man's version of his well-refined talk. And anyway, his taxonomy comes from a blog post, and so here is the long version. It's kind of long to read through, so in his talk he kind of shortens it up, and what I want to kind of do is give examples of kind of some of each of these. And rather than be like exhaustive about what's out there in the Python community, kind of just show you like a few examples of how to interact with some of these tools, how simple it can be just to get kind of started. If there's one that you find interesting, I would think that like the configurations I'm about to show should be like a good starting point, and then you can kind of go do your own discovery from there. I put a GitHub repo out there. I think it's public. It has some example of bad code that like some of these linters can catch some things and show you kind of just kind of demonstrate how they work. Here. So for this slide, before I start talking about the individual tool, this is going to be kind of a format that we're going to see on the rest of the slides here. So this gray box over here is going to be what you have to run on your terminal. in order to do this, use this tool. I'm assuming we are starting in the root of some repository that has Python code in it. Everything that I'm showing is using the pyproject.toml standard. So these blocks, these black blocks with color in them, with color text, these are going to be the pyproject.toml configuration for that tool. And I'm showing not quite minimal examples. These are what I could fit on a screen, we'll say that. Like it's not entirely realistic, but it just kind of demonstrates some of the things that a tool can do. All right, so with that, how many people here write typed Python code? Okay, a few of you. How many people know that you can type in Python?
What do you mean by type Python?
Ah, great. That's the question I want to hear. Great. So, do you have experience with any other programming languages?
C++.
Great. So that's a great example. So C++, is a statically typed language, right? You have to announce that this is an integer that I'm going to use before you can use that variable, right? So Python has the notion of type annotations. So like in a Python, so let me see if I have an example here. Probably not, because that would be way too convenient. All right, here's a very simple example. So is this showing up? Oh boy, that's nowhere near legible on. Oops.
You got a return type for these.
Yeah, that's what I was going to show. So I got a return type. So what you can do here is, you got your your arrow here, and then you have the word none. So what this is saying is this function will not return a value. You can also say something like A is an int, B is a string. Actually, you know what? I do have another example in here. Let's go look at our utils. Here we go. Yeah, so here's one. So I have a value, it's integer, the total is a string, and then you can see this is an example where I can show that MyPy is going to catch something. Actually, my editor is already on top of it. So it's saying I'm assigning an integer to something I've announced is going to be a string. So MyPy is just a tool that allows you to catch those kinds of problems in your code. That's kind of a trivialized example, but you can imagine if I'm calling this function over this module here, but I defined it over here, then it's a little harder to readily see what your types are. So there's a lot of different tools in this ecosystem, and some of the big companies have written their own. So like Pyre is out of Meta, PyType is out of Google, PyWrite is out of Microsoft. They all kind of boast variations off a theme here. So I think of these, PyType can actually generate type annotations for you, I think is what they say on their tin. I don't have a ton of experience. I think I told Jonas and Ferris that like one of the talks I'd like to do is kind of a deep dive into these tools, because this is something that our company is kind of actively exploring. Because MyPy is kind of the venerable tool here. So one of the cool things about MyPy is I have this strict here. So this is going to fail on anything that's not typed. You can actually take this off and do gradual typing. So anytime you add annotations to a function, everything in that code will then be typed. So if you're making calls to other typed functions, that'll throw errors. So that's kind of a nice way to kind of gradually type, like if you have an existing code base where you're not doing typing.
How is this any better than just using Python's native typing?
Python's native typing, excuse me, like you're saying.
Python has its own native typing library where you can annotate saying this returns a list, a dictionary. So it's just like a show.
Sorry, what's the library called?
I think it's called it's just called typing.
Oh, no, that's what you're doing.
This is typing.
Yeah.
So how is this different from,
typing.
Why is this tool any better than what's natively available in Python?
So those types that you're adding, at runtime there's nothing done with them unless you use like a tool like TypeGuard or something. Like there are runtime checkers you can use, but if you just import typing, from typing import any, Python does nothing with that information. It's only when you run it against these static analysis tools that it actually will respond to you and say, hey, you're not doing this. Just because example. Just because I did this Python will run this code just fine. It won't care.
But the static analysis in VS Code puts a little squiggly red line.
Yep. And actually, in this case, it'll be a runtime error if I gave it a string, because it would try to divide an integer and a string. So the correct solution here is to say this is an integer.
You might touch on this too, but you had your badges for your GitHub repos up. Maybe can you explain like how this tool ties into these badges? Is there a MyPy badge in there?
I don't have, at least this one, I don't have a MyPy badge.
Okay.
I will admit, some of this code, probably not typed.
I'm trying to set you up for it, but what I'm getting at is like this tool you can put in your GitHub pipeline.
Yep.
And then your entire team is basically required to put typing, or whatever you agree for as a team.
Yep.
It will enforce the standards, and you don't merge it until it passes whatever checks you have in your opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that might partly answer your question.
Yeah.
What the use of this is, and it works. And like you were saying, it works directly with the typing library, the native Python typing stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of these tools, they're not necessarily they're going to prevent you. They're going to prevent you from stubbing your toe later on. Is kind of what they're meant to do. Formatters. Anybody use formatters on their Python code? Yeah.
I use black. I don't
Use
like
black?
it. But
You don't like it?
no.
Okay.
Because
Well,
I feel like my formatting, the way I like to format, is different from how black likes to format.
if you want a more configurable one, you can use yet another Python formatter. Our company's going the other way. We were historically on this, and we had to like include like this recursion standard configuration in every project, and it's kind of boring. It's kind of annoying. So we said let black do it.
I use that same config though. So
Yeah.
That's my one thing with black. It's like, let me make a longer line length.
Yeah.
I'm not typing on a terminal.
Yeah, so I would argue the advantage of black is that it is opinionated, and you shouldn't sweat the small stuff. Like one of the things I wrote in my notes to say about this slide was using a formatter is a lesson in letting go of the small stuff.
Yeah. And it standardizes
It
across.
standardizes it. Yep, and you don't have to think about it. You don't even have to. You don't even have to write your code that way, right? You can write your code how you want, and then just do a pre-commit hook, and it's like before it goes to see it, before it goes into repo, then it formats it. The advantage of this, I'm talking about programming in a vacuum, so the advantage is that you, the reviewer, and I urge you, even if you are, a single solo shop, review your own code. When you make changes, especially if you're applying all these linters, and some of them will do automatic fixes. Take the time to look at what it's doing and understand why it's doing those changes. But yeah, so if you're doing this, you're just focused, when you have these change sets that are minimalistic, you're focusing on the code that actually matters. Yes, sir.
I use black, but I also, and I know it's been deprecated, but I use Beautify also.
Okay.
Is there something out there that is working today better?
I don't use Beautify, so I don't know. Can't comment on that. Anybody else in the audience use Beautify or know? Is it
It
Python?
aligns your structures of your code so that you've got the nested stuff under your ifs and
Oh, so it ensures that like all your indents are four spaces because
Right.
you could mix and
they're
match.
lined up. Yep.
I think Black will do that for you.
I got both.
Okay. I would encourage you to try without Beautify and see if anything
I
happens.
actually have I have a mentor,
Okay.
and this guy has written 2 books, and he's been doing 12 years. And I actually removed Beautify, and he put it back pretty quick. So I figure he knows more than me.
Yeah, we can ask. I'll ask ChatGTP later. Okay. If you watched, did anybody watch Al Swigert's talk before I keep mentioning it?
Which one?
The one from this year, 2023, is the landscape of Python tooling.
Probably missed it. I
Okay.
try to watch his talks because
Yeah,
he knows how to automate all the things.
he's good. So yeah, he also writes some good books. This tool kind of is a very interesting tool. It is written in Rust. It re-implements a lot of some of the other ones like It's meant to kind of be a replacement, I think, for Flake 8. But I've had a lot of fun kind of digging into this tool. It's actually showed me other tools that exist in the ecosystem, because what Mr. Marsh, who writes this tool, is doing is he's kind of aggregating all of the best tools out there. Like there was one I learned about. It's not in this talk. It's called Triceratops, which will actually like scan your try except blocks and suggest improvements on those. And so like what I'm showing here, there's like this select statements here. Each one of these is like a different thing. So I think like D is like documentation, so it's gonna like look at documentation strings and try to format them. But yeah, really cool tool. A really cool thing about this, it also has a -- fix flag. So like black, which I don't think I failed to mention, black won't just tell you what's wrong with your formatting, it'll actually fix it for you. Rough has the ability to do that in some capacity. It doesn't fix everything, but it's kind of a really cool tool, and I really encourage people to look at this one. It does, things like error linting and let's see, what did I say at the outset here? There was all these things. Yeah. Style listing, style linting, it'll do like PEP 8 standard. But yeah, a lot of cool stuff there, a lot to unpack. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving on though. Code complexity. So we had a great talk from Christian earlier. He talked a little bit about this. I think he referred to indentation hell. The more academic term might be code complexity or cyclomatic complexity. If anybody's heard of that. Here's a tool. Radon is a tool that can do cyclomatic complexity and this maintainability index, maintainability index. That's what it is. MI. So these are just things like any metric. They can be gamified. So I wouldn't say to like target a specific thing, but if you're coming into like a larger code base and you're trying to trying to think about ways you can improve it, I've had success of like running this tool and being like, oh, this module really sucks. That module is okay. So I kind of, if I'm going to do any refactoring, I kind of focus on the areas that maybe there's just a little bit more complexity to try and tease out whether it's necessary complexity or unnecessary complexity, right? Because we as humans, we tend to create unnecessary complexity with fair regularity. Right? Fair regularity. We heard mention of Bandit earlier, so here's just a bunch of security-focused tools. I threw in a non-Python one. I don't know if anybody works with Docker containers, but the one at the bottom here is a Docker scanning tool. You can find instructions of how to install it for your OS. I took the short route and just said, okay, they actually have an image that I can pull and I can actually run it against whatever I want.
Which checks the image itself, like.
Yep, checks the image for security vulnerabilities, like if you have out-of-date OS system packages or things like that.
If you're using root instead of
Yep, exactly. Yeah, if you're overprivileged user or stuff like that. I would argue that these might be some interesting flags to add to it. You don't really care about things that you can't fix, so no use worrying about that unless you are a security expert. You do want to go figure out how to fix base image stuff, and then also just kind of, if you're new to this, you probably just want to start with your high-end criticals. You'll probably have a lot of noise. These things tend to be pretty noisy.
Have you used safety lately?
Yeah, we actually stopped using it internally because of the open source kind of issues.
That was my question, because the package is open source, but the database it uses is not, and they never seem to resolve that problem.
Okay. I thought it was like, I thought the database was open source, because I thought I've like looked at it. They like have it in the repo, I thought, because you can actually go and look at it.
I last used it like, 5 years ago, and they advertised how open source they are. Then you look at the license of the database, it's not open. So we were sort of violating the license agreement, and I messaged them, opened the support case, and they didn't even have a solution. Like, there's no way to buy it or get a license or.
Yeah, like if you're doing it, I would recommend this is like, only for open source, projects. Because there are some licensing issues. The last I remember was like, there was a free open source database that's updated monthly, but if you wanted like to the day, you had to pay for that feature. And so that was the last I knew. What I'm showing here is from scratch. I use a tool called pip tools, so I'm installing that so that way I can generate a requirements file from the repo that I shared earlier. And then I just do safety check the requirements. What this is going to do is it's going to find dependency packages and if there's any out-of-date things there. As the gentleman back there mentioned earlier, the tool Bandit will do a static analysis of your code, find things like credentials in the code base, or possibly injection attack type of problems if you have if you're doing like exec commands and you're opening input to users.
SQL injection type things.
I'm not sure about that. I don't think like SQL Alchemy kind of does some of that.
SQL injection.
For you.
I mean, you could use SQL Alchemy by concatenating a string to send as a SQL statement, right?
I'm not sure. I'm an infrastructure engineer at the time, so like I haven't been doing too much database stuff. So I apologize. I don't have the answer to that, but
I use GitLab in my work, and GitLab uses Bandit.
Okay.
And I've noticed it catching SQL.
it will catch that. Cool. So it will catch SQL injection. That's good to know. Anything else to mention here?
Another one for safety is poetry.
Poetry will do safety.
Poetry does you don't even need a requirements anymore. It does all the dependency checks and creates a whole
Nice.
like a pip freeze.
Yeah, like a lock file.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
Yeah, cool. And it'll warn you about security vulnerabilities if like you've been.
it just checks the dependencies and.
Oh, so it's a replacement for this.
Correct.
Yeah. I wrote a blog post for me and Isla Khan, another engineer at my company. We wrote a blog post about some of these tools if you're interested. Poetry is one of the ones we kind of evaluated. We settled on pip tools for our company, but we did some kind of like benchmarking about like speed of these tools, and then also looking at kind of like ergonomics. Some of the things with some of them, like I don't know if it was pip tool, or if it was poetry, or if it was pip but one of them, like in some of our test cases, it would just like hang. This was also like 2 years ago. I'm sure they've fixed that bug.
Poetry uses. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Just tracking on poetry.
Yeah, but I fall in love with it too. Poetry used PyProject.toml format too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it has its own, but it has like its own proprietary like.
It has its
set.
own section.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the PyProject.
Yeah. One of the things I like about pip tools is like I can put my dependencies I can put right under the project specification, so it feels like a little bit more open spec kind of thing. But whatever. I have my opinions, and they're worth what they cost, which is free. This is an interesting tool. I've been experimenting a little bit with it. We have this kind of as like an experimental feature on our CI system. It'll do performance linting. So a lot of Christian's talk where he's talking about big O and stuff like this. This will kind of I do not have a configuration because this tool does not have a configuration. I think it's all command line flags if you wanted to do things, but it'll find interesting things like this variable is set every time on a loop, so it's a loop invariant, so you can take it out. It actually is. If I run it on this code, I believe it told me something about. Here we go. Yeah, use a dictionary comprehension instead of a for loop. Yeah, so this was directly pulled from their examples of like bad code. Importing, and then it'll actually say, importing the Python version tuple name directly is more efficient in this loop. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so some interesting stuff there. I think it's pretty new.
It's amazing some of the stuff they've got.
So we're almost done. Thank you all for sticking around. There's just two more. I would argue that these are more like meta linting. So this one here, this page is all about linting documentation. One cool thing I learned about PyDoc style when I was first introduced to it was there's actually different standards for doc strings, and I would encourage you to adopt one for your organization and use it. Having that standard, and like there's actually a cool, I don't know if anybody uses VS Code. There's a pretty cool extension. I forget what it's called. I'll find the name in a second, but it actually will. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. Let's find a different example. Generate docstring. Okay, I don't have a properly. Oh wait, let's do something interesting. So A, is a list. B is an int, and we'll return. Yeah, sure. That sounds good. There we go. So it'll actually generate boilerplate for me. So super nice feature. Not a linter, but also interesting. So the two tools I'm pointing out here, PyDoc style, the first one is going to kind of lint your doc strings to make sure that they follow your standard. The second one is going to do something similar to like what PyTest Cov would do. So like it's going to give you a report on how much of your code is actually thank you. Document. So you can see you get this nice little tabular output here. I got a few places I'm missing docstring score, but yeah. Pretty cool. Docstring coverage does the same thing as interrogate. I chose interrogate because it has prettier output. Package linting. So yeah, now you've got your code into a great state. You want to upload it to PyPI. Pyroma is a tool you could use to lint the setup of your package to make sure that you have like a proper description. You have URLs for your package, stuff like that. Everything I've shown, like I mentioned, is using PyProject.toml. I found this kind of useful. So your mileage may vary on any of the things I showed before if you have an invalid PyProject.toml. So that's why I included this in the talk. There's this nice tool that'll give you bugs on your PyProject.toml file.
What kind of bugs? Like not just toml formatting, right? Like does it know what config settings exist for the different tools?
Yeah, I think to some extent it does. I can't remember when it's fixed things. I know we had an automated script that went from, and this might have been a toml thing. We had an automated script that took us from like a setup.cfg format and setup.py to pyproject.toml for a lot of our pure Python packages. And so in that translation script that I wrote, I made a bug in it so that like it would wrap like the headings with like quotes. So it was like square bracket, quote, tool, dot, PyTest. And so it caught that for me. I don't know if a regular toml validator probably might have caught that as well, but yeah. Yeah, we saw some of this already. Everything I showed was kind of old and decrepit. I expect the future to be a lot different with tools like Copilot, the generative language models. I'm not going to say too much about them. I think we're still in a hype phase. Like, yes, they are productivity boosters, but stay tuned for more, I think, coming out of those tools to help us write better code as humans. Again, if you liked anything I said, I'd recommend going and look at some of these resources. I mentioned Michael Kennedy and Brian Hawkins' podcast, Python Bytes. A lot of the tools I first got wind of from that podcast. They release weekly. They do live shows on YouTube. You can subscribe through RSS. I think I have our Slack internally set up to be alerted when these drop. They take like 4 to 6 interesting stories. They take submissions too. A lot of the tools come from this Python Code Quality Authority GitHub organization. I already mentioned Al Swigert's talk. And then if you want like a ready-made cookie cutter project, if no one's familiar with cookie cutter is a templating engine that will allow you to kind of set up a new project. This hypermodern Python cookie cutter has a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier, just already configured for you out of the gate. I don't know if any of you all need this, but if you are, I can't get away from sentimental, I apologize. If you are a newer developer and you are finding yourself with that kind of overwhelming sense of isolation, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. No more excuses. Go just put your code out there and let the world ridicule it. It's not going to be as bad as you think. If you're the more senior people in the room, I encourage you to do what you can to fail in the open. Let other people see your vulnerability.
Junior debt for life.
make your let people see your incompleteness, the chinks in your armor, and how you kind of adapt to that. And yeah, with that, thanks for staying late for me. Thank you, man.
We just have one point of order. Can somebody pull up a calendar and help me with this part?
I'm sorry, should I have left this?
No, you're fine.
Just any calendar, or
I need to see when next first Wednesday of the month is going to be in July.
If it's the 4th or not.
It's the 5th.
Yeah, nobody's going to show up for that. So our next meetup will not be on the 5th. It will be on the 11th. If I did the math right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was it 12th?
12th.
Well, am I counting post fences or posts, right? That's always what gets me off by one.
7. 5 plus 7, 12.
12, yeah, 12.
Okay. That's correct. Whoever said I was correct, stop sucking up to me and just call me out, okay? Especially when I'm wrong. I'm just kidding. No, yeah, the 12th, I'll make an announcement about that. We're open to do any speakers at this time. I do have one kind of lined up, but they're kind of hedging, just like my tone is kind of hedgy right now, so maybe they won't do a talk. I'd love to hear about Bloodhound. I feel like that'll be like a podcast in person, because I like true crime podcasts. Anyway.
What kind of talks are you looking for?
Python is the second best language at anything, so.
Can I talk about a project that I'm working on?
Sure. Violate your NDA. I'm just kidding.
It's my own personal project.
Please, that's a great place to bring it up. We don't have the whole Python thing of don't talk about your package. We want you to talk about your package here if you're working on it. So Python package here.
I mean, it's something I'm working on. I just want to show what's possible.
Yeah,
That I thought was cool.
yes. This is the forum for that kind of talk. It could be an open-ended kind of thing. Yeah, and I had one more point that I was going to make, and now I forgot.
We also try to encourage recycling talks from
Yeah.
elsewhere, or using this as a venue to practice talks that you then recycle elsewhere. So that's totally cool.
Yeah. It's kind of like a fork of a talk, right? And you remix it. Yeah. I'll probably remember in like just a moment, but I can't right now. So let's do the giveaway. Who owns a Raspberry Pi and has been hacking on it actively? Okay, I don't want people who bought a bunch of scalper. Just kidding. If you keep your hands up, and are any of you a student right now? Yeah, you're a student. No, yes.
I am a student.
But you didn't keep your hand up for the. Oh, keep your hand up if you're also a student with the.
But you have to work.
teach
You have to
Do you have
play
a
with
Raspberry
a
Pi?
Raspberry Pi and be a student.
Yeah. No. I'm just trying to pre-select. Do first filter. Okay, who's the other four who have the Raspberry Pi actively coding on it?
I said actively coding.
The first question again. Yes, actively. Okay, good. Stay honest. Okay. So out of these three, maybe we'll do. Do you mind coming up here? We're gonna do.
Sure.
All three of you guys. We'll do a rock paper scissors tournament real quick, and the winner will get this guy. And this guy is a hat you can put on your Raspberry Pi. And the hat is just a clever way for saying, like, hey, it's a bunch of system-on-a-chip tools with some sensors. In this case, we have a temperature, pressure, humidity sensor, and microphone. So it's kind of like, if you set this up, you could be like, oh, my workspace is too loud, or oh, this open office plan is ridiculous. So, yeah. Sweet, we'll go YouTube first. Ready? Tournament? Do you know how to play rock, paper, scissors?
Yeah.
Okay, you play winner.
Okay, great job.
Paper, scissors.
We go.
One. Okay, that was a practice round. 1, 2, 3. Okay. You're the winner.
Okay.
Next round.
Just 1 of 1. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not gonna overcomplicate this.
Oh yeah, probably.
No 3 of 5. Okay.
Oh, that was a practice round.
Practice round. So one practice round. Ready? That's the mental English thing. Ready? On my list.
I think it's about when I was there. I was trying to learn math.
You know,
Oh yeah.
cool. Yeah, there's some pretty interesting stuff.
Good play.
Yeah.
Now, and the other thing is, you just earn yourself homework. So we want to see the project. Just message it to the group. We have a few months. Actually, tomorrow. I need to do tomorrow. I changed my mind.
Talk about it.
Yeah, give a talk about it. If you want to give a talk, awesome. Yeah. Hope everybody has a good one. Drive home safe. I'll see you on the 12th, right here. I need to update the INSCC booking. That